Hey, how's it going? It's Joey, and I wanted to share my process on how I made this visualizer with essentially a marathon model. And I gave myself around a deadline to complete this project. Programs I used for this were Blender, After Effects, and then a little bit of Illustrator. I'll show that here in a sec. Got the idea from just listening to this, having music on my rotation. I came across a song called Overdrive by Barely Live. It came out, roughly, 2 months ago as of this recording. And I got this idea of putting a knob on the side of the helmet. Let's dive into that. That's where it all really started. So about when that song came out, or about like a month or two ago, came up with the idea as I was listening to it, like, what if we put a knob on the side of this character? And if you're wondering where I got this character from, I got it from this Discord called Marathon Model Ripping. A lot of cool and fantastic people in there that make some great work. I decided, like, what if we put this knob on the side of this character's helmet? Because as you know, in the game Marathon, this character Recon has this ability, and her helmet will open, the flaps will open, giving some sort of pulse that runs across the ground. What I did was I started modeling this knob first. It was just a basic knob. I did kind of reference a video. I'll put a screenshot of the video I used up on screen. But I kind of just followed that, made this knob, and then amended it to the helmet. And the way I did that was I took this snap right here, but I'll get to that later in a sec because I kind of want to go to the overview of the texture, and then I'll get to the process of the animation. So first thing I did was I decided to make this vector on the side of the helmet because Recon has these like lines that go across their helmet like this, or you can see like other symbols and graphic assets that are on the helmet. So I decided to take the base color or the diffuse texture into Illustrator, and what I did was I essentially just made these vectors over pre-existing vectors, because the reason why I wanted to do it was, you have a knob on the helmet, maybe give some type of indicator what is happening. So the song's called Overdrive, so I was like, what if I just put the song name on the helmet and it's like the character's going into overdrive essentially. So yeah, I just made this simple texture. I just took some circle shapes, and then I kind of circle projected this text like this, made a little line to kind of indicate that the knob's spinning into overdrive. And then all I did was just I exported this back out and I threw it into Blender. Now these people have this preset. They've kindly set up these model and have these preset shaders and stuff like that in Blender. So what I did essentially was if I take the metallic value off, this is what it looks like if you just import it into Blender. It's kind of this helmet material, it's kind of gray, it's not really shiny, so I kind of wanted something reflective and a bit more dark. So what I did was I just went to this node group, we kind of extend this out, and then I just plugged a color ramp into the metallic, get it how I wanted to get, and then plugged it back into the group input. And then all I did was I just took a metal texture or a metal displacement or roughness. Yeah, essentially just took this texture, plugged into a color ramp, plugged into a mixed color node, set it to multiply, and then I got this dark value. You can see if I even put the metallic up, makes it dark. But I added the texture to give it a bit more, substance. That's what I essentially did for this. And then part of the animation was I took this knob and then I just snapped it to the helmet. I think I added a child of on the knob to connect it to the helmet. So I don't know if it was just a child of constraint, put it to the skeleton that's already kindly rigged. That's what I did. And then I used this snapping. These are the settings I used to just snap it to the helmet. Basically was to just use center, face, and then align with rotation. And then as you can see, if I move the knob anywhere, it will just snap to the face of the model. So I just kind of got it in the center, aligned it where the texture was, and then I got it to spin with the hand. So I just positioned it in the hand, positioned the fingers to where it's holding the knob. And the way I got the knob to turn with the hand was I added a bone constraint, same thing, just on the bone constraints down here. I added a child of to the knob, and then just position the hand, so when I just move the knob, the hand will move as well. And then I just did a top-down camera view to kind of give some emphasis on the knob basically, and then I just had just keyframe the camera to rotate as the knob's rotating, just a little pan dolly in real quick. And that's where really the idea started. I don't know, I made this around a month or two ago. And I was like, what if I just make a visualizer out of it? So I gave myself around a week deadline to get this done. As I started listening to the song, I brought the song into After Effects, and then I just keyframed parts of the song. If you double tap L, you can see the waveform. And then if you, I think it's if you right click on it, or if you right click on it and then deselect rectify waveforms, you can get a better waveform on the audio. But I was just listening to the song and I marked parts that I thought would be good for a cut or a sync or a drop, etc. Let's go dive into the scenes of what I did. So I really made, I made 2 scenes, and then these were kind of rushed last second, I'm not gonna lie, because it was the sort of the visualizer was just gonna be here and then throughout. But we'll dive into this scene and then this scene, and then these were kind of last second, so I don't really want to go into them really. I'll just explain it once I get back to the editing part. Let me open up this scene real quick. Yeah, this is the rundown of the first scene. So let me just hide a bunch of this stuff real quick. We'll start with the light rays on the outside. So the first thing I did to get these light rays was I took just a basic sphere. And then I just scaled it on the y-axis to give it this long look. And then what I did was I just made a cylinder, just a long cylinder like this, and then I applied a particle system to it, and then a wireframe to cut out, make it kind of opaque and get rid of the bounding a bit. Then all I did was I just keyframed the position to go up. As you can see, I just keyframed it to go up, so these light rays will go up as the platform's moving up. And then for this platform, I just made a cube and just scaled it down on the Z, and then scaled it on the X and Y axis. If you don't know how to do that, it's just S, Shift Z, and scale it like this. Then what I did was I took the skeleton and just child upped it to the platform, so as the platform rises, the character will rise as well. And then I just added a basic noise texture to the material. Just a noise texture plugged into a color ramp into the roughness, and then just crunch the values a bit. And then I made a second platform. I just duplicated it, and then I just added a wireframe material, or a wireframe modifier to it. And then I actually forgot to go over the material for the light rays. All I did was on the sphere, I just made a new material and just put the emission up to like 1.7 and made it blue. So, and then I added some volumetric fog, but looking back on it, I don't think I really needed it. So then as far as the lighting went, I just added a point light. I actually added 2. So I added a point light to kind of give it this rim light effect to kind of give your eye somewhere to look as the platform's rising up. So that's what I did with this. And then as far as the other platforms in the scene, these platforms, what I did for this was I just made a big cube like this, and then I went into geometry nodes and I just instanced the this regular platform. And then this is just the setup I did. Just made an instance on points, distribute points on faces, and then I just plugged the cube into the instance. Ended up using a random value like this. I added a transform geometry to kind of give the platforms, I don't know, some depth. So as the platform is rising up, these will rise down to kind of give it some sense of motion in a sense. And all I did was just keyframe the Z value going down. That's all I did. To kind of get the camera to be centered on the platform as it's rising up, and these point lights as well. As you can see, as the platform is rising up, all this stuff in the scene is staying stable. So what I did to do that was I just took an empty, just Shift A, empty, and just added a regular plane axis. And then I just parented everything to this axis. It's kind of hard to see, but I just parented everything to this axis. So I parented the platform and the lights and the camera, and that was really about it. And then I just keyframed the axis going up for the scene, and that's basically the 2 other scenes as well. I'll actually dive deep into them because there's one technique I forgot to use in this first scene that I ended up using in both the other scenes. So let me open those real quick. Yeah, it's the same exact scene, same exact technique. I actually forgot to mention some of the lighting I did, but all I did, took a different camera angle, same thing, parented it to this axis. And then for these lights, as you can see, still the same 2-point lights. As you can see, one only affects the model. You can see if I move it around, it's only going to affect the model, and it's not going to affect the floor. And this other one affects the floor as well. Kind of gives it some more volume, some more attention to where to take your eye. So what I did for this light was I did this method called light linking. All you got to do is you select your light, you go into the object properties, you go to shading, you go to light linking, and then you just link your light to the collection that said object is in. So this whole model, Recon, is in, it's its own collection. So I just took the collection that the model's in and put it in here. So the light will only affect this model. And then I also did some other lighting. This was actually in the first scene, but I added a little area light under the platform to kind of give it, some light. The next thing I did was I added a very small light, area light, just the same surface as the platform, and that it's very low intensity, like power, 1 or 2. But as you can see, if I up it, you can't really notice it that much, but it's just on 2. If I hide it, like, you don't even really notice it. But if I, turn the value up, you can kind of notice it. But that's all I did. Same technique, platform just rising up. And then the last scene, same thing, just different angle, all that stuff, etc. Just different camera angle. And then I don't know if I mentioned this before, but I did add volume into the scene. But this next scene was a bit more complex because it uses some audio keyframes and stuff like that. So I'll just get to this scene overview real quick. So I carved out the platform using a Boolean. I just made this big platform and then just made a little cube and Booleaned it to the floor. What I did was I put a modifier of UV project on it because I'll show you in a sec. So I just used the same material I was using before. Just plugged the noise texture into a color ramp, plugged it into the roughness, took the base color down, and then you add Boolean to this. And then, as you can see, if I take this UV project off, that the texture is not displaying properly in the UV of the bigger floor. So how I fixed that was I added a UV project and then just selected the bigger cube. Yeah, you can see these rough edges. You can see where it's kind of cut out and the texture doesn't align with the, the floor essentially. So that's what I did for that. And then to make these buildings, I just took a cube and then I just kind of viewed it, or I just brought the top face to one side, kind of give it this angled look, and then I just extruded it up. The typology is kind of fucked on this, I'm not gonna lie, but yeah, that's what I essentially did. And then I added some loop cuts to this. How I got these pillars like this was I just Control R, added a loop cut, then I went to edge and then offset edge slide. So this kind of gives you some of those like this, and then you have edge, offset edge slide, and this gives you like this little, it just takes the center edge and gives it like a border. And then I just dissolved this edge right here, and then after that I just took the faces that were in between like here, and then I just extruded those backwards essentially. Well, I inset them first, and then I just extruded them backwards, or brought them backwards. And then same stuff here, just added the same noise texture that's on the floor to this building. And then as far as this material, this glow material on the in between the pillars, what I did for that was I made kind of a CRT effect on the screens. So I'll show you that right now. So I just selected these faces. Let me go back, take that loop cut away. So I just selected these faces, added new material, selected, and then just assigned it. Shader setup I did for this to get like this screen RGB type look. So there's this one video I found that's how to make a CRT TV in Blender, and there's this texture in there that's like it's just an RGB texture, basically like this. So I just took that. I took a regular texture I found from Unsplash, and I just kind of combined them together, and then pretty sure I just literally just cube projected them. The shader setup essentially is you take your first shader, you take your RGB shader, and then you're both gonna add a separate color node to them, like this. on each side so you can separate the red, green, and blue. And then you make a math multiply node. You basically just plug the respective values into each one. So the top one, you're both going to plug the red into this one. As you can see, the middle one, you're both going to plug green into it. And the last one, you're both going to plug blue. And then just added a combined color node. And then this part, I added 2 emission shaders. So this one controls, just the brightness of like the environment, essentially. As you can see, it's projecting on the ground. And then this next one controls just the brightness of the screen itself. So that's what I did for this. And then as you can see, there's like you can see the RGB splitting on it, but I didn't really want that. So I just took a color ramp and plugged it into the separate color to kind of give it a more neutral palette instead of, seeing all those random colors around. And then I did take a hue saturation node. So this was the base color of it. So as you can see in the first scene, it's blue. And then as the floor rises up and the character is going to pop, I don't know, their ability or do the hand gesture down, I just literally just keyframe the hue value to make it red. And then you can see there's this vector on the top of this building. I was working with projection maps one day and I made some vectors in Illustrator, and all I did was I literally just took this and I shrink wrapped it to the building. And one issue I ran into was I just arrayed this in a circle, as you can see. So what I did was when I originally arrayed it, it was just arraying like in a circle like this, vertically, not displaying properly across the things. So all I did was I just hit Control A, applied all transformations. Since with this, I just make sure you apply the scale, arrayed it on each building. So I actually forgot to go over this scene real quick. So this is when the platform raises up through the floor. There's this plugin called AutoCam. I was originally going to have the camera like up here somewhere as the platform is rising through the floor, so you kind of get a sense of the environment, but I ended up not doing that because I exported it and I put it into After Effects and it just did not flow with the sync of the song. So I was like, I kind of wanted something with more velocity. So there's this plugin called AutoCam that I used. So essentially what it does is it simulates, like if you're, I don't know, like a dolly cam. I don't know if you ever used a dolly cam editing, like a COD montage back in the day, but this is what this kind of simulates in a sense. So all it is you just add camera, and then once you install the plugin called AutoCam, you can press N on your keyboard and you have this AutoCam over here, and then you can start recording and flying around and stuff like that. But if you don't know how to get into this viewport, to get into the camera, you just press 0 if you have a 100% keyboard to get onto it. But I changed mine to my mouse button. And then to fly around like this, like you're in a video game, you gotta go to your preferences, key map, and then I think it's called viewport navigation or some navigation. Yeah, view navigation, walk, fly. And I just set my keybind to Shift F. And then you go Shift F, you can fly around, and it's just like you're in a video game. You press WASD, Shift to move faster, Alt to move slower. Yeah, this plugin or extension just builds off that. So you just hit start recording and fly around. It adds keyframes for you, and then you can say generate curve, and it'll generate the camera curve. But yeah, I did that, and then it gives you this rig that this person kindly made. And I just modified the curve and keyframed some of the other stuff within the AutoCam. But it is kind of rough. I'm not gonna lie to you. There's some other parts that I wish I could have touched up a bit. But I kind of wanted to give it some velocity or build up into the drop. And then I'll go over the animation I did for the model real quick and the little effect that pops out when the visor pops up. So I just animated for this part. I just same technique. I added a point light behind to kind of give it some rim light, and I just animated some of the skeleton a bit. As you can see, I just really animated the hand, the fingers, the hips, the torso, kind of all of that stuff to give it some more, I don't know, emphasis basically. But yeah, I did use Bezier curves to kind of, give the animation more emphasis, etc. And then the way I got this kind of like circle to pop out was I just made a regular circle, Shift A, and then add a regular circle, and then just bring it up real quick, and then window edit mode, E, extrude it up, and then A, Alt E, extrude long faces to kind of give it, some little depth on the circle. That's what I did, and then I took the outer parts and I made that a glowy emission. On the inner part, what I did was I just selected the inner edges, and I just pressed F and created a face. So the way I got it to expand as it goes out is all I did was literally just keyframe the scale for it to go up like this. So you just press S, scale goes up. And then for this texture in the middle, I'll show you real quick, was I took just a grid texture from this website called Texture Labs, and I was messing with some stuff because I wanted as the circle grows out, you can kind of see the grid on the edges of the circle. Like think of like this circle growing and it, projects on the ground a bit. That's what I kind of wanted, and for it to project in the middle a bit. So what I did was I took a wave texture, I made it very small, and then the texture coordinates, just put it into an object UV because I found that was working. And then I put a multiply add node. So this kind of makes the circle grow in a bit, as you can see, with a very low scale on the wave texture. And then I just took the texture, plugged it into the base color, put a little color ramp on it, and then put a mixed color node with multiply to give it, a red feel. It's kind of rough, I'm not gonna lie. Definitely, if I spend some more time on it, I could definitely get it to look a little bit better. But essentially what I did, I forgot to mention this, I plugged this into the alpha to give it transparency. I totally forgot about that. But yeah, that's how you get the transparent look when like this is growing out and stuff like that. So yeah, I kind of wanted it on the edges like this to emit from the edges, and then come full circle like this. So that's what I did for that. And then the next part, I'm going to show you how I did the audio sync or visualization in the background. All right, for the audio reactive part, we're gonna need to set up some technical stuff first. So what we're gonna have to do is make sure your start keyframe is 1, and then what we're gonna go here is we're gonna add the video editing tab so we can put in our audio. So I did that here, just, video audio tab, just make sure you're in the correct scene, and then I just added my audio, and then whatever frame rate you're editing in, you're gonna need to make sure that aligns in Blender too. So for this project, I was editing in 30 FPS. So I'm making sure my composition settings are set to 30 FPS in After Effects. So making sure these lined up. Another specific part. So let's say, I don't know, you're editing some specific part. So we'll go to like, so it starts around like here. As you can see, the start keyframe is 1354 and the end keyframe is, what's it, 1541. You can see this by seeing whatever program you're using. I'm just using After Effects for this, but let's get into the actual sync part of the reactive visuals. But that's just sort of the technical side that you kind of need to be wary of when you're starting this stuff. So what I did here was I just made a plane, scaled it up really big, and then let me go to the geometry nodes over here. You have to do this in geometry nodes. This is how I did this. But you can see it's all jumping around and stuff. And then for the setup, I did follow a video for this. There's actually 2 I kind of reference for this audio visual. I'll put them both up on screen and just link them in the description. Yeah, this is basically the geometry node setup I used, but it's mainly powered by a wave texture and then a bunch of vector stuff. What I did was I had this instance on points right here, and then I just took a cube geometry, and all you do is shift A, just type in cube, and then I made the cubes like tall and skinny. So as you can see, they're kind of tall and skinny like this. So what I did was I just set the X and Y to 0.1 and then Z to 0.25 to give it that skinny look, and then I just plugged it into the instance. And then the most important part here is the reactive part for the visuals, or the geometry, shall I say. So and see if I scale this value up, the geometry begins to jump. The way you do that is, I'm just gonna clear these keyframes real quick, zero this out, and then you're gonna make sure that your keyframe is at 0 when you're doing or adding the audio in for keyframes. So the way you do that is, I'm just gonna add a keyframe by pressing I on this, and then we go to here in the graph editor, go to channel, and make sure you select your node first, and then you're gonna go to channel, sound samples, and then you can just add your audio in like this. All right, so when you have the sound samples open, the next thing I'm gonna do is convert this sound data to keyframes, basically. So the way you do that, just make your node select and make sure you got a keyframe on, and then I'm gonna do channel, sampled keys. So this gives you, keyframes for each individual frame and each individual audio peak. And then what I did was I just hit S, hit Y, and just scaled it up to give it some more, data, some more peaks. So when the audio's bouncing, it's kind of more reactive in a sense. So makes it just gives it more peaks, more data to work with. And then what I did was I pressed N and make sure that this is selected actually. Pressed N, and then the modifier added was a limiter. And then I just checked the Y and I just kept it on the Y a bit. And then if you want to go back and scale your keyframes, just gotta make sure you turn this off, hit S or hit A, select all, just S then Y, you can scale it up a bit more. I think I scaled it up to like 10, somewhere around there. But make sure you start at 0 because let's say, I don't know, you start at keyframe 70, that's where the sound samples is gonna begin to, that's where it's gonna place the audio, and it's not gonna sync correctly with where you have your song starting and where the audio is going to be lined up. So that's how I did that. Then as you can see, as the audio is playing, see if I take this value off, it's kind of just very linear in a sense when it's like moving. I don't know, there's not really any like wave distortion, it's just the individual points going up. So what I did was I took a map range, plugged it into this value, and then I messed with these map range values. So I kind of made them, I messed with them so you can get these, these like waves. So let me go to like a peak in the song. So like over here. So I messed with this so it kind of gives it more of a waveform type of style. And then I just literally did the same thing. I did sound samples on this, and the only thing I did different on this was I didn't add a limiter. So then I kind of turned the map range values to kind of some high values. You can see like -59, all that stuff. So as the audio's playing, you can kind of see the waves moving with it, as you can see. So I don't know, if I set this to like 0, it's just going to be just flat. So that's what I did with this, but that's kind of essentially the setup. Basically, another important part is the geometry proximity. But yeah, that's what I basically did for the audio visualizer, or the audio reactive part. I forgot to go over the material on the geometry nodes real quick, so I'll do that. So all I did was at the end I set a set material, and then I set the material just to have a glow, and then I just put an object info, random, did this little color ramp sequence, and I'll put the emission up to like 2. As you can see, that's too bright. Just added a color ramp into the alpha. Actually, I don't even think I really needed this, to be honest. I just used really this part. So, and then for the camera, what I did was I kind of did the same technique I did in the first scene. Was I just literally just took an empty and I put it in the center, and then all I did was rotate it around. And the way I gotta specifically know in the part of the audio where I needed to render was, I made sure it was lined up at 0, and then I just wanted to, my keyframes, took these values. So the scene's gonna end, or I have these markers up here for the audio and where I want a certain scene to be. 1541, so I put that in the end, and then at the beginning of the frame, 1354. So I just took that value, plugged it into the start, and then that's how I got the specific part to, in the song where the drop happens, to get these audio visuals, this audio reactive to sync up to the music basically. And then for the dance animation, it's just literally the same scene as I put out before. I just exported this model, and then I just exported it into Mixamo, and then I just imported it back in and put the shaders on correctly. So that's what this basically is. For my render settings, what I did was I did it in 4K and just rendered in 64 samples, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. I either rendered in 64 or 128. And there's one part I do wish I kind of regret doing, just because the renders took a bit longer. Let me go back to this scene. I decided to render with volumetrics on this scene, and it kind of obviously sped up the render time, but I think each frame took around like 20 seconds, at least with the specs that I have. So, but using my render settings was I did 200% for 4K, and then 64 samples, and I used Optics X for the denoiser. And then for my compositor settings, all I did was I literally just took a glare node, did a bloom, and that was kind of all I did to kind of give it some glow, essentially. And then for the color management part, I did Aces 2. Or I found this script that you can, or these files that you can put into Blender, and you get all these cool looks and stuff like that. And then just Aces 2, up the exposure, up the gamma a bit. That's pretty much it. And then I rendered in PNG. I was going to render in EXR. I did render one scene in EXR, and then I realized to not carry the color management over from the Aces. Because I put the footage into After Effects, and I was like, why does it not look like the same as it does in Blender? And I figured out those are just EXR files. I mean, you can do it. You can't get the color management to fall in line with, you know, the EXR format, but you gotta start changing the color profile in After Effects when you put it in. You gotta change the color space essentially, and I was like, I didn't really want to mess with that, so like you would have to change it to OCIO, and I didn't really want to mess with that, basically because it was just kind of a visualizer. I kind of wanted more of the RGB look, if I'm gonna be honest. And then the way I just imported them in was just double left click on this, and then just go to your folder where you rendered all the frames, shift select, and then just PNG sequence. Yeah, I know people say don't render in PNG just because the files are bigger, but I mean, I have this file space, so. And then now for the effects part, yeah, I just synced it up to each part of the song I thought was good. I'll just go over some basic effects I did. So we'll go pan crop. So pan crop is just like when each time you switch between a scene, it kind of gives it a little jump scale, and then I just eased it. You know, I put the scale value, or I just made it like a sharp curve, so when it goes in the next scene, it like jumps into the next scene, as you can see. Like if I set this to, I don't know, just 100, and I go to the next scene, no like intensity as it's going through the song. So this is what the pan crop is kind of for. And then as for the effects, I'm not gonna show the effect of the CRT one I made, mostly because I bought it from I basically bought it off somebody, and I don't want to like ruin their product. Not ruin their product, but just give it away for free. So, but before buying the product, I did know that the way you kind of get the CRT effect is there's two effects you can get to get that CRT effect. So the first one is you use the grid, or use the grid effect. That's one you could use, and then the other one is CC ball action. So those are the two how to get those, you know, CRT analog type look. But other than that, that was basically it. And then I just color corrected each kind of scene individually with Lumetri color, and then just added some glow. But that was basically it, and that's how I basically did this audiovisual under kind of give myself a timeline of a week. So, and then as for these last two scenes, or these first two scenes, these were kind of last minute. They were kind of rushed. I definitely wish I could redo this, like specifically this one. As you can see, as I'm scrolling through it, if you look at the hand, the lighting's kind of fucked on it. I don't know what I did, but this randomly just glows. So that one's kind of rushed, and then this one I just took a close-up of the vector and just put a point light going across it. I definitely wish I could have messed with these metallic values, as you can see a bit. These are kind of coming off the helmet a bit, not as I'd like. They were more blended in, but I just added some simple text animation in here. I just scaled up put animate, scaled individual characters, and then just regular scale, and then just easy keyframe them into the scene. Yeah, that was essentially just the breakdown of this short little visualizer I did. Other than that, if you learned something new, feel free to subscribe. I definitely do want to post more processes of me and the projects I do. Maybe some more in-depth, something more animated. This is kind of just raw, just a little recording. But other than that, socials are linked down below. But you know, have a good one.